a globally recognised circular economy expert who happens to specialise in business-led change. In 2016, she successfully negotiated Australia's Industry Packaging Sustainability Agreement with government. As a strategic leader in Asia-Pacific, her opinion is frequently sought, and she doesn't hesitate to give it. I can say that because she's family. Please welcome founder and MD of the Plastic Circle and my dear sister-in-law, Trish Hyde.
It is wonderful to see you all, and I know that you're probably desperate for that cup of tea and coffee. But while we've got everybody here, I thought it would be great to ask a couple of questions that have, for me, funneled up from what you have said. The first is there's this fantastic intersection between the legal and the less legal. We find that in trade, we find it in the informal worker sector, and having to actually bridge that is one of the big challenges that seems to be in Asia, and ASEAN countries are looking to solve circular economy. So I thought it would be great to get some panel comments on how they see that divide, because it is tricky. Who would like to go first?
Actually, I'd like you to mention the word less legal and legal. I start with the example of, again, Malaysia, because we have an official yesterday. We saw some of the material that being inspected and rejected. At the same time, we also understand that some of these materials, in fact, nothing wrong with it, from my point of view, because these are recyclable and can be recycled in a also very, very environmental way. The only difference is, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, or probably you'll be able to comment later on that. I know in Malaysia, or most of Southeast Asian countries, we have two systems to import. One is, we have a factory, they already have or gone through the environmental assessment, which means that they get an import license, and then they're given certain things that they can import under HS code 3915, for example. And I also believe Thailand also. And at the same time, we also have situation where some of the processor or scrap recycler, they are given permit to import material that for re-export, or give it to a factory, they can make into product and export the product. That they call it manufacturing license warehouse or license LMW, okay? Yeah, license manufacturing warehousing. And for some material that are imported, okay, because of the regulations, they don't even know whether, I think the lawmakers who might not understand our business very well, and they're the one that govern our industry. And our industry never really have a chance to talk to the lawmaker or to convey their views, point of views, or voice out what they can do, what they cannot do. And I think there's, again, mismatching, and again, there's a miscommunication or non-communication. So this is where I would start. I'm happy that today we have some recyclers here, we have some brand owner here. Brand owner looking for recycled content, looking for recycled material, but where are they? And recyclers, they don't show up. Because probably they are doing something less legal. Why is it less legal? Because probably they don't have the import license, and they have to buy material from the import license holder. It seems like in China, and Mr. Wang probably know very well, as he's from the custom. There are lots of recyclers, but it's only 1,700 licensed factories that allow to import overseas scrap. So this is where I start, okay? But of course, later on we also talk about like pollution, air, and also like water, and so legitimacy of the factory. Yeah, so this is the thing I start.
Fantastic. Sumangali, did you want to comment on, because that also applies into the informal sector, and your comments about needing to legitimise that workforce?
Right. I think a critical component is to be actively regulating this space. And when I say active, it means really taking note of the impact that certain policies, standards, even recycled content standards, all of these that can have, or plastic bans that can have an impact on small businesses, on the informal sector, or even the recycling industry. A complete or like an overarching ban on import of plastics might limit the growth of a domestic recycling industry, while at the same time, we need to build domestic feedstock and build that collection systems from within. So I think when I say active regulation, I think we need to be really focusing constantly and seeing how can we, in a graduated manner, bring these policies in or bring regulations in, rather than have a blanket rule and say that's where the buck stops.
Fantastic. Oscar, did you want to comment on how regulation and your findings within the food grade packaging of contaminants, given that we have to have legal systems to meet quality, but if it's forced underground, what does that potentially do?
So this is also, I think, is quite hot discussion in China. So for the sustainable topics and for the regulation, from the regulation side, we need to concern about the safety issues, because China is, fed 1.3 billion people there. So each materials or each substance we need to use for food packaging, we need to consider about the safety issues. So this is the bottom line. And to our work, I think, is to minimize the gap between those materials who are recycled materials or biodegradable materials can be used for food can application. Yeah.
Fantastic. Belinda, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that for the informal sector specifically, I think there's lessons that have been learnt in Latin America and other places that have an informal sector on how to bring improved safety standards, livelihoods, remove child labour, and really help to almost semi-formalise that sector and improve livelihoods. So I think there's a role to be done, and there's lessons to be learned from other regions. Certainly not perfect anywhere, but there's a lot of improvement that could be made, and industry has a role to play with that, and so does government.
Yep, fantastic. Doug, would you like to comment on that interplay between the legal and the less so?
Well, I second what Steve said, and I was at one of the food packaging events in China, and it was a very interesting debate between some of the groups who really want to bring food grade packaging into the market and legally, and your colleague, but the other safety side seems to be a big fear because of enforcement and the ability to get safe materials into the from the recycling stream. But I think there's also a brand role that is missing. The brands, especially in Asia, sometimes seem to be afraid to be proud that they're using recycled content in their product, whether it's food grade or not food grade, because of the fear that the society will have that this is a second grade product, or it's a reused product, or it's not a new product. And I think that there's a strong education that could really help with everyone working together, that the industry can help educate the consumer that these things are all technically possible and safe, obviously with the right enforcement and checks and balances. But we might be able to scale that a bit better if there was some.
Yeah, I would second that. I mean, I think, inherently consumers do trust big brands like ours, and we have extremely stringent safety standards. We will not introduce a material unless it's been through our own processes, which in many times are more rigorous than the regulation. And, from our research with consumers, if it does come from a big brand, there tends to be more acceptance, and we are communicating. So we've started it, but we are communicating it's made from recycled material, and provided consumers are informed correctly and understand, they are receptive. So yes, I mean, there is a role for brands to play in this, and it has to be done hand in hand with policymakers.
my last general question for the panel brings to light another element that's come through this morning, which is accountability and responsibility. It is a brave decision that Coca-Cola made when that commitment, the global commitment, and others have followed and made commitments. And I'd just like to refer to the panel on how important those market signals are for bringing material through recycling, through engaging the informal sector and the recovery sector, and generally how that should play out across the board. Just general comments for anyone who'd like to.
Well, I think it sends a great market message to the industry of recyclers, recoverers, entrepreneurs, innovators who want to feed the demand for them in the next 10 years. You now have the Nikes and Adidas of the world competing with the Cokes and the Pepsis for the supply chain of recycled plastic bottles because they want it for fabric or they want it for bottles. And that's a pretty exciting challenge for the world, because now everyone wants to find plastic bottles in volume and the right quality, which means that there's great chances out there for the informal sector to be involved, entrepreneurs, innovators to get into this space, and that's only for PET, not to mention all the other materials that will want to be coming out of China. And the interesting part is when China has banned the import of recycled content, and a US or European manufacturer wants to buy new manufactured goods with recycled content made in China, they can't get it now because a lot of that material is not coming in the border. Is that right, Steve?
I would like to comment from the perspective as being a recycler. When we talk about recycled content, in fact, recyclers don't really understand or don't really know the requirement. And also, when people talk about recycled content, they had to consider, first of all, mechanical, chemical property, color, price, as what I just mentioned. And I think there's also mismatching. When I say mismatching means there are lots of, I give PET as an example. I know in the States, for the fact that nowadays, our PET bottles recycled content is selling about $1,500, for example, okay, or even more. But then on the other hand, things that doesn't reach this recycled content requirement might only sell for $400. And because of this, right, the recycler is getting really difficult to financially be able to do it, and at the same time, brand owner also should extend the recycled content to some inferior materials, and also like just now I showed the bottle. I don't understand, or I don't know 100%. For example, when they talk about recycled content for PET bottle, technically, when they say about 100%, how you deal with the viscosity? Because normally we need viscosity of like 0.8%, 0.8, yeah.
I'm going to have to refer you to someone in my technical department for that.
Okay.
I don't think that's a fair thing.
And then second is the color. Okay, I saw this morning one of the bottles you have, unless this is the one like with small, 0.5% of the pigment or master batch, black one. Okay, then to make it to cover the off color. Otherwise, I don't see that is recycled content, because I see there are lots of brand owners company themselves. I mean, this is the norm that they normally say, 20 to 25% 2021. Yeah, and then 50% 2025. Okay, that I still believe we can achieve, but I don't believe that 2030 they can achieve use 100% recycled content.
I would agree with that, and that's not our goal. Our goal is 50% recycled content.
No, okay.
So, but in some instances, it's 100% recycled bottle. It sends an important signal to consumers.
I really want to see, I want to know, because I think here we also have lawmaker here. We also have government official. I mean, this is UN. I really think that, okay, but make commitments, okay? And I think they need to, the general public need to know, okay, there's a criteria.
Yep, I completely agree. And I think if I can summarise what that is and what we're talking about here across the panel is that continued dialogue. Yes, it is important to understand what 100% recycled content looks like. It will not, in HDPE, it will not be pure white. So if you feel that your marketing brand cannot survive that, then that is a challenge for that laundry product company. But the developments that are happening, and even the consumer awareness, is important to get over those hurdles. So, Steve, I think what you've raised is absolutely important, that we need to have more scientific and technical discussion as well as consumer discussion. And that's probably a good time to segue into morning tea so that you can all have some time for discussion and discourse. Thank you to our speakers.